Creepy Ryokan Experience by Friendly Banshee, posted to r/paranormal. We just left Hakone after having the best time, but I can't shake off the paranormal experience that I had at Ryokan Onsen, where we stayed for 2 days. My husband and I are in Japan for 2 weeks to celebrate our second wedding anniversary, and we thought an onsen experience would be a nice treat, so we booked a Japanese-style villa with a private onsen. Our villa was quite far from the ryokan entrance, and we always had to walk a few extra minutes to get back and forth. The staff informed us that the ryokan was 140 years old. It was so beautiful and looked straight out of Spirited Away, which was perfect since we're both Ghibli fans. On our last night there, around 12:30, just after midnight, as I was about to sleep, I heard a loud bang on the wall. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, but it seemed close to the main door. At first I thought it might be someone knocking, but I didn't want to check because I was scared and a coward, and I figured it was too late for any of the staff to be bothering us. I tried to ignore it and kept scrolling on my phone, but then there was another loud bang. This time, I couldn't really determine if it was from the wall or the ceiling. I looked to see if my husband had heard it, but he was sound asleep. I started getting really scared, thinking of all the Japanese horror movies I had watched, like The Ring and The Grudge. I tried to push these thoughts aside and go back to sleep, but I kept waking up, not randomly, but like somebody had tried to wake me up. It was honestly one of the scariest experiences I've ever had. A Ghost Reacted to Me Reacting to Her by Impressive End 4826, posted to r/paranormal. This was 12 years ago, when I was 9 months pregnant with my son. I was sweeping the porch when I suddenly got this pain and thought for sure that I was in labor. So off we went to the hospital. I get all hooked up to the machines, and they tell me that I am in fact not in labor and sent me home. Mind you, I was in excruciating pain. I couldn't sit, stand, or lay down. My fiancé rubbed me for an hour trying to get me to sleep, and finally I was out. I slept like a rock. I woke up semi on my side, and I see a little girl maybe 2 feet from the foot of my bed, just staring at me, curiously, like a child would. I'd say she was 8 or 9 years old. When I slightly adjusted my head to actually take in what I was seeing, she took off running, like a child would that got caught doing something they weren't supposed to be doing. I was not hallucinating. I was not dreaming. I've never had sleep paralysis in my life. She reacted to me, reacting to seeing her, and playfully took off running. It's something I will never forget. I remember I sat up in bed and looked over and saw my fiancé asleep, and then I just stayed up for my OB appointment. She wasn't dressed in old vintage clothing or anything like that. It was a baby blue nightgown. I don't remember her face, but that's what I saw. This is a 100% true story. Imaginary. This whole thing started when my 7-year-old niece, Lily, came to stay with me for the summer. I'd rarely gotten to spend a lot of time with her, so I was really excited to create a bonding experience. I've always been into the outdoors, and she loves being outside, so naturally, I figured a camping trip would be a great way to get to know her better, create some great memories, and just have an awesome time. Plus, kids are so connected these days with devices and whatnot. and let's face it, so are we adults, that I thought getting away for a while could do us both good. I had no idea, though, just how away things were about to get. We packed up my old Subaru and headed out to Glacier National Park. It's a place I've been to dozens of times, but seeing Lily's eyes light up as we drove past those snow-capped peaks made it feel brand new. The first couple of days were pretty standard camping fare. We hiked, we roasted marshmallows, and I taught Lily how to skip stones across the lake. She was having a blast, but I noticed she kept talking to someone who wasn't there. She called it Whisper. "Hey, Lily, who's Whisper?" I asked her one evening as we sat by the campfire. Lily looked up from her hot dog, her face serious. "He's my friend. He lives in the woods." I nodded, playing along. "Oh yeah? What's he like?" "Oh, he's tall and his skin looks like tree bark. He doesn't talk much, but he's really nice." I chuckled. Kids and their imaginations, right? On the third day, we decided to hike up to a waterfall that I knew all about. It was a bit of a trek, but I figured Lily could handle it. As we walked, she kept stopping to talk to thin air. "Lily, honey, we need to keep moving if we want to reach the waterfall before lunch," I said, trying not to sound impatient. She looked at me, confused. "But Uncle Jack, Whisper says there's a better way. He knows a secret path." I sighed. "Lily, we need to stick to the trail. It's not safe to wander off." She pouted but followed along. I made a mental note to talk to her parents about this Whisper character when we got back. Maybe she needed someone to talk to about the divorce. We reached the waterfall without incident, and I have to admit it was pretty spectacular. Lily was entranced, watching the water thunder down the rocks. I was setting up our picnic when I heard her shout, "Whisper, no! You're not supposed to show yourself to grown-ups!" I turned, expecting to see her talking to the air again. What I saw instead nearly gave me a heart attack. Standing next to Lily, with one long, gnarled hand on her shoulder, was something. It was tall, easily 7 feet, with limbs like tree branches and skin that looked like rough bark. Its face, if you could call it that, was a hollow in the trunk with 2 glowing points of light for eyes. I froze. Lily looked from the creature to me, her face a mix of excitement and worry. "Uncle Jack, this is Whisper. I told him not to come out, but he wanted to meet you." My mind was reeling. This couldn't be real. I was hallucinating or dreaming or something. But as I watched, the creature, Whisper, moved. It was fluid, like a tree swaying in the wind, but unmistakably deliberate. I found my voice, though it came out as a croak. "Lily, come here. Right now." She frowned. "It's okay, Uncle Jack. Whisper's my friend. He won't hurt us." The creature tilted its head, those pinpricks of light focusing in on me. Then, slowly, it raised its free hand in what I realized was a wave. I didn't know whether to wave back, run, or faint. I compromised by taking a shaky step forward. "Lily, please come here." She looked up at Whisper, then back at me. "It's okay," she said again, but this time she was talking to the creature. "Uncle Jack's nice, he just doesn't understand yet." Whisper nodded, actually nodded, and gently nudged Lily toward me. She walked over and took my hand. I pulled her close, my eyes never leaving this creature. What is he?" I managed to ask. Lily shrugged. "I don't know, he's a forest spirit. He protects the trees and animals. He says not many people can see him anymore, though." As if to demonstrate, a squirrel scampered up to Whisper and climbed onto his shoulder. The creature reached up and gently stroked its head. I felt like I was losing my mind. I mean, what in the I am Groot was going on here? But the longer I looked at Whisper, the less terrifying he seemed. There was a gentleness to him, a quiet wisdom in those weird glowing eyes. He's real, I said, more to myself than to Lily. She grinned. I told you. Whisper took a step toward us and I tensed, but he simply bent down and picked up a fallen leaf. With movements almost too quick to follow, he folded and twisted it, and when he held it out to me, it had become a perfectly crafted leaf boat. My hand shook as I reached out to take it. The leaf felt cool and slightly damp, undeniably real. Thank you, I said, surprised to find that I meant it. Whisper nodded again, then looked at Lily. She cocked her head as if listening, then turned to me. He says he has to go now. People aren't supposed to see him for too long, but he wanted you to know he's real so you wouldn't worry about me talking to him. I nodded dumbly. What else could I do? Whisper raised his hand in another wave, then simply faded. One moment he was there, the next he was gone, leaving nothing but a faint shimmer in the air. Lily squeezed my hand. Are you okay, Uncle Jack? I looked down at her and then at the leaf boat in my hand. I'm not sure, kiddo. That was, pretty cool, right? She grinned. I couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, pretty cool, I guess. But, hey, maybe we keep this between us, okay? I don't think your parents would understand. She nodded solemnly. Whisper said the same thing. He says most grown-ups forget how to see. As we packed up our picnic and headed back down the trail, I found myself looking at the forest with new eyes. What else was out there that I had forgotten how to see? Beacon. I've always prided myself on being prepared. Boy Scout training, wilderness survival courses, top-of-the-line gear. I thought I had all the bases covered. Turns out, Mother Nature doesn't give a damn about your merit badges or your REI membership. It was supposed to be a simple day hike in the Adirondacks. 6 hours tops. I'd done it a dozen times before, but I guess there's always a first time for everything, including getting hopelessly, terrifyingly lost. It started with a wrong turn, or maybe I misread my map. Either way, by mid-afternoon, I knew I was in trouble. The familiar trails had given way to unmarked wilderness, and the sky was darkening with ominous storm clouds. I tried retracing my steps, but in the dense forest, everything looked the same. As the first raindrops fell, panic started to set in. I fumbled for my phone, but out here it was nothing more than a fancy paperweight, maybe a flashlight. No signal at all. The rain turned into a downpour, and darkness fell faster than it had any right to. I found some shelter under a rocky overhang, and I tried to think. I had food and water. I had warm clothes. I could survive the night. But the thought of spending hours in the pitch-black forest, alone and lost, made my stomach churn. That's when I saw the first light. At first I thought it was a flashlight. Another hiker, maybe, or a search party. I shouted, my voice hoarse with relief, but there was no response. The light flickered, a pale blue glow bobbing between the trees. It seemed to be moving away from me. Without thinking, I followed. "Hey," I called out. "Wait, I need help." But the light kept moving, weaving through the trees with an unnatural grace. It was joined by another, then another. Soon, a string of ghostly lights danced before me, leading deeper into the forest. Part of me knew this wasn't right. Lights in the woods at night? Moving like that? Every campfire story I had ever heard screamed at me to turn back. But where else could I go? At least the lights were leading me somewhere. I stumbled after them, slipping on wet leaves and tripping over hidden roots. The rain had soaked me to the bone, but I barely noticed. All my focus was on those mesmerizing lights. They moved faster now, and I struggled to keep up. My breath came in ragged gasps, my legs burning with exertion, but I couldn't lose sight of them. They were my only hope. Suddenly, the lights winked out. I skidded to a halt, my heart pounding. "No," I whispered. "No, please come back." For a moment, all was darkness. Then, slowly, a soft glow began to spread around me. It wasn't coming from any one source, but seemed to emanate from the forest itself. The trees, the ground, even the air, shimmered with a faint, strange light. And in that light, I saw them. They weren't much taller than me, but their proportions were all wrong. Limbs too long and thin, heads too large and oddly shaped. Their skin, if you could call it that, rippled with the same pale light that filled the clearing. I wanted to run, to scream, to do something, but I was frozen in place, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. One of them stepped forward. Its face was featureless, save for two large almond-shaped eyes that seemed to swirl with starlight. A voice echoed in my head, though the creature's face didn't move. "You followed." I managed to find my voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. I'm lost. I need help." The being tilted its head, an oddly human gesture. "Many become lost in these woods. Few find their way to us." What are you?" I said. A ripple passed through the group, almost like laughter. "We are the forgotten, the in-between. Neither here nor there, but everywhere." My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. "Are you aliens?" Another ripple, stronger this time. "We have been here longer than your kind has walked upright. We have watched your cities rise and fall, your empires crumble to dust. We are of this earth and yet apart from it." I swallowed hard, my mouth dry despite the rain. "Can you help me? Can you show me the way back?" The being's eyes seemed to grow brighter. "We can show you many ways, ways you've never dreamed of. Paths between worlds, shortcuts through time and space." A thrill of excitement cut through my fear. "You mean you could take me anywhere? Any time?" "For a price," the voice in my head whispered. I hesitated. Every story I'd ever read warned about making deals with mysterious beings, but then again, how many people ever got an opportunity like this? "What kind of price?" I asked. The being stretched out a hand, long fingers glowing softly. "A memory. A moment of your life, given to us freely. We collect them, you see, experiences, emotions, fragments of human existence." I thought about it. Just one memory? Seemed like a small price to pay for, what? Adventure, knowledge, a way home, all of the above. "Any memory?" I asked. The being nodded. Your choice, but choose wisely. The more precious the memory, the farther we can take you. I closed my eyes, thinking back over my life. What could I give up? What would I be willing to lose? And then I knew. I opened my eyes, meeting the star-filled gaze of the being. My 10th birthday, I said, the last one before my dad left. It was a good day. A warmth seemed to emanate from the creature. A cherished memory. Are you certain? I nodded, pushing away the pang of loss I already felt. I'm sure. The being's hand touched my forehead, cool and tingly. For a moment, I was back there. The cake, the presents, the laughter, and then nothing. A blank spot where the memory used to be. Even now, telling the story, I know I had a 10th birthday. I know what numbers are, and I know it was the one before my dad left. And I remember that it was good, because that's how I described it. But the memory itself is gone. When I lowered my hand, the clearing had changed. The rain had stopped, and the first light of dawn was peeking through the trees. But these weren't the same trees. The air smelled different, saltier somehow. Where are we? I asked. The being gestured to a gap in the trees. See for yourself. I stepped forward on shaky legs. As I emerged from the forest, I gasped. Before me stretched a vast ocean, waves crashing against rocky cliffs. And there, silhouetted against the rising sun, stood a circle of massive stone monoliths. Stonehenge, I breathed. But how? A small step for us, the being said. A giant leap for you. I turned back, 1,000 questions on my lips. But the being raised a hand. We must return you. You cannot be seen. In another moment, I was back in the clearing. I looked toward where I had just seen Stonehenge and found only trees. When I turned back to ask the first of those 1,000 questions I had, the beings were gone. I thought at first it had to be some kind of hallucination, brought on by stress or dehydration. But I knew it was real, because I felt the gap in my memory where my 10th birthday should have been. I tried to grasp for things that weren't there anymore, but before I was sure were always present. In the place of the memory, though, I had a weird sort of knowledge. I wasn't lost anymore. I knew exactly how to get out of the woods, even though I still had no conscious idea of where I was. The walk back to the woods I knew was almost on autopilot. My mind was reeling. What had I just seen? What had I just experienced? I got back home, safely, obviously, but I've never quite been the same since. I try not to let it consume me. I don't think that's healthy. But it's hard not to dwell on something so incredible. You can believe me or not. If you don't, I can't really blame you. I know how it sounds. But something very real happened to me out there. And I'm not sure I'll ever be able to go back to before. Light thief. I never thought that I'd be one of those people sharing a weird story on the internet, but here I am. I guess I need to get this off my chest, and maybe someone out there has experienced something similar. This happened about 3 months ago, and I still can't shake the feeling that what I saw was real. I'm a wildlife biologist specializing in large mammals, particularly deer populations in the Pacific Northwest. My job often takes me into remote areas for days at a time, tracking migration patterns and monitoring overall herd health. It's not glamorous work, but I love it. There's something about being alone in the wilderness that speaks to my soul. This particular trip was supposed to be routine. I was heading into a section of old-growth forest that hadn't been thoroughly surveyed in years. The area was difficult to access, requiring a grueling hike through dense underbrush and overfallen logs. I packed enough supplies for a week, including my usual gear: GPS, radio, camera traps, and various data collection tools. The first 2 days were uneventful. I set up my base camp near a small clearing and spent my time hiking predetermined routes, noting signs of deer activity, and setting up camera traps at strategic locations. The forest was unusually quiet, even for this remote area. I chalked it up to the unseasonably warm weather we'd been having. On the third night, things changed. I was in my tent, reviewing the day's data on my laptop, when I heard it. A low rumbling sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. At first, I thought it might be distant thunder, but the sky had been clear all day. The sound grew louder, and I felt a vibration in the ground beneath me. Curious and a bit unnerved, I unzipped my tent and stepped outside. The forest was bathed in moonlight, casting long shadows between the trees. That's when I saw movement at the edge of the clearing. Something large was moving through the underbrush, far too big to be a deer, or even a bear. My heart raced as I fumbled for my flashlight. I knew I should probably stay in my tent, but professional curiosity got the better of me. As I swept the beam across the tree line, I caught a glimpse of something. It was tall, at least 8 feet, with a broad, hunched silhouette. The light reflected off 2 eyes that seemed to glow with an inner fire. For a moment, we stared at each other. I could hear my own ragged breathing in the silence. Then, without warning, it moved. The creature crossed the clearing in 3 enormous strides, covering ground faster than anything I'd ever seen. As it passed by my tent, I caught a whiff of musky, earthy scent that reminded me of wet fur and decaying leaves. I'd like to say I acted bravely, but the truth is I panicked. I scrambled back into my tent, zipping it shut, as if that flimsy barrier could protect me from whatever was out there, and I spent the rest of the night huddled in my sleeping bag. I strained my ears for any sound of the creature's return. When morning came, I cautiously emerged from my tent. The clearing looked undisturbed, but as I investigated further, I found enormous footprints pressed into the earth near the tree line. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen before, roughly humanoid in shape, but way too large, and with strange protrusions that looked almost like claws. I spent the next hour photographing and measuring the prints, my scientific mind warring with the part of me that wanted to pack up and get the hell out of there. In the end, curiosity won out. I decided to stay and continue my work, but I could never shake the feeling of being watched. Over the next few days, I caught fleeting glimpses of the creature, always at a distance, always just out of reach of my camera. I heard that rumbling sound a few more times, usually at night. Once, I woke to find my camp had been disturbed. Nothing was damaged, but things had been moved around, as if something had been curiously examining my equipment. On my last night in the forest, I had my closest encounter yet. I was sitting by my campfire, eating a lackluster dinner of rehydrated camping food, when I felt that now familiar vibration in the ground. I slowly turned my head, and there it was, standing at the edge of the firelight. I could finally see it clearly. The creature was massive, covered in shaggy, dark fur that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its face was a strange mix of ape-like and something else entirely, with a pronounced brow and a broad, flat nose. But it was the eyes that held me transfixed, deep-set and intelligent. They regarded me with what I can only describe as cautious curiosity. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. I didn't dare move, afraid of breaking whatever spell had brought this impossible being into my camp. Eventually, it let out a low, rumbling sound. Not quite a growl, but more like deep exhalation, and slowly backed away into the darkness. The next morning, I packed up my camp, albeit with shaking hands. As much as the scientist in me wanted to stay and study this incredible creature, I knew I was out of my depth. I hiked out of the forest faster than I'd ever moved in my life, and I was just frantically trying to figure out what had happened. My mind was racing with questions and theories. I've spent the months since then trying to make sense of what I saw. I've pored over cryptozoology forums, read every Bigfoot encounter story I could find, and even reached out to a few researchers in the field. Nothing quite matches what I experienced. I haven't told anybody at work about this. I'm not ready to risk my professional reputation on a story that sounds like something out of a campfire tale. But I know what I saw, and I can't just pretend it didn't happen. I'm planning to go back to that forest soon, and this time I'll be better prepared. More cameras, better audio equipment, maybe even a thermal imaging device if I can get my hands on one. I don't know if I'll find anything, but I have to try. Whatever that creature was, it deserves to be studied and understood, not dismissed as a myth or a legend. To anyone reading this who might have had a similar experience, you're not alone and you're not crazy. There are things out there that defy our current understanding of the natural world. All we can do is keep our minds open and keep searching for the truth. Hunger. The fire crackled, sending sparks dancing into the night sky. Around it, our small group huddled close, more for comfort than warmth. It was July in the Boundary Waters, but tonight, a chill hung in the air that had nothing to do with the temperature. Old Joe cleared his throat, his weathered hands clasping a tin mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. His eyes, rheumy with age but still sharp, scanned our faces before settling on mine. "You asked about the strangest thing I've seen out here," he said, his voice gravelly from years of smoking hand-rolled cigarettes. "You sure you want to know?" I nodded, trying to hide my excitement. Joe was a legend among us guides. Been trapping and fishing these waters for nigh on 60 years. If anyone had stories to tell, it was him. He sighed, set down his mug, and leaned forward. The firelight cast deep shadows across his face, making him look older than his 70-odd years. "'Twas a winter of '69, he began. "Coldest damn winter I can remember. The kind of cold that freezes the air in your lungs and makes the trees crack like gunshots in the night. I settled in, knowing we were in for a long one. Joe's stories were never short, but they were always worth the listen. I was just a kid then, 22 and full of piss and vinegar. I thought I knew everything there was to know about these woods. Boy, was I wrong." He paused, his gaze distant, lost in memory. "I'd set up my trap line about 20 miles north of here, way out in the back country. No roads, no trails, just wilderness as far as the eye could see. I'd been out there for about a week, checking my traps when a blizzard hit." Joe shook his head. "Never seen nothing like that. Snow was falling so thick and fast couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I knew I had to find shelter, and fast, or I'd be dead afore morning." I leaned in, caught up in the story despite myself. Around the fire, the others were just as enthralled. I managed to make it to an old trapper's cabin I knew of. Hadn't been used in years, but it was still standing. Got a fire going in the rusty old stove and settled in to wait out the storm. Joe paused again, reaching for his mug. His hand was shaking slightly as he took a sip. Everything was going all right, till I heard it. First, I thought it was just the wind, but when it came again, a sound like nothing I'd ever heard before. It was a scream, but not human, not animal neither. It was hunger. Pure, ravenous hunger given a voice. A shiver ran down my spine. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a storm playing tricks. But that's when I saw it. Joe's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. We all leaned in, straining to hear. Through the cabin's one grimy window, I saw a shape moving out there in the blizzard. Tall, Christ, it must have been 9-10 feet high, thin as a rake, but moving in a way that wasn't right, like its joints were all wrong. He swallowed hard. And its face. God help me, its face. Just empty white eyes and a mouthful of teeth like icicles. One of the younger guides scoffed. Come on, Joe, you expect us to believe you saw a wendigo? Joe's eyes snapped to the kid, suddenly sharp as flint. Believe what you want, boy, I'm just telling you what I saw. He turned back to the fire, his voice low and intense. It came closer to the cabin, moving in fits and starts. I could hear it sniffing, searching, hunting. I knew deep in my bones that if it found me, I was dead. Worse than dead. Joe's hands were shaking in earnest now. I had a feeling he was not putting this on for effect. I doused the fire, tried to make myself as small and quiet as possible. But it knew I was there. It started circling the cabin, scraping at the walls with claws that sounded like knives on wood. He closed his eyes, lost in the memory. Went on for hours. Sometimes it'd go quiet, and I'd think maybe it had gone, but then I'd hear it again. That awful screaming hunger right outside the walls. Joe opened his eyes, looking at each of us in turn. You've got to understand, I wasn't some greenhorn. I'd faced down wolves, bears, even a mountain lion a couple times, but this? No, this was different. It was evil, pure and simple. He took another sip of his coffee, grimacing at the cold liquid. As the night wore on, it got bolder, started throwing itself against the walls, trying to break in. The whole cabin shook. I was sure the roof would cave in at any moment. Joe's voice had taken on a distant quality, like he was reliving it all over again. I don't know how long it went on. Felt like days. I was starting to think I'd gone mad. Maybe I'd died out there in that storm and this was my hell. He shook his head, coming back to the present. But then, just as sudden as it started, it stopped. Storm broke, and with it, that thing disappeared. Joe fell silent, staring into the fire. We all sat there, hardly daring to breathe, waiting for him to continue. Finally, one of the other guides spoke up. What happened then, Joe? He looked up, seeming surprised to see us all there. What happened? I got the hell out of there, that's what happened. Packed up my gear, didn't stop moving till I hit civilization. Told myself it was just exhaustion. Cold playing tricks on my mind. Joe sighed suddenly, looking every one of his ears. But I knew. Deep down, I knew what I'd seen. Took me years before I could come back to these woods. And even now, all these years later, I still hear that scream sometimes in my dreams." He leaned back, his piece said. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant call of a loon. Finally, I couldn't help myself. Do you think it's still out there?" Joe looked at me, his eyes unreadable in the flickering light. "These woods are old, kid. Older than any of us can imagine. They've got secrets we can't begin to understand. All's I know, there's some parts of this wilderness I won't go into. Not for any amount of money." He stood up slowly. "Y'all best get some sleep. Long day of guiding tomorrow." As he shuffled off to his tent, the spell broke. The other guides started talking amongst themselves, nervous laughter punctuating their conversation as they tried to shake off the chill of old Joe's story. But I sat there, staring into the dying embers of the fire. I thought about the vast wilderness around us, the dark spaces between trees where anything could be hiding. And I wondered, not for the first time, if maybe there were things out there that defied explanation, things that lived in the shadows, feeding on fear and desperation. I shook my head, trying to clear it of such thoughts. It was just a story, after all, the kind of tale old-timers loved to tell to spook the youngsters. But as I finally crawled into my tent that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the darkness beyond our little circle of light. And in the wind that came through the pines, I could almost hear the echo of a scream, a sound of hunger that would never be satisfied. The Cold Room by G.G.L. It was a typical summer evening, warm and humid, with the kind of heat that sticks to your skin. I had been out most of the day, running errands and catching up with friends. When I got back home, I was ready to relax, maybe watch a movie, and just unwind after the long day. But when I stepped into the house, something felt off. The air inside the house was warm, just like it should be, except for one place, the basement. It was freezing. I paused as soon as I stepped down the stairs, feeling a chill that seemed out of place given how hot it was outside. The basement door was open, and I could feel the cold air seeping through the cracks in the wooden frame. I've been down there plenty of times before, in all seasons, but this was different. It felt like stepping into a completely different environment. I stood at the top of the stairs for a moment, confused. The house was warm. The AC was running, as it always did in summer, but I hadn't been down to the basement for a few days. The odd thing was, the air in the basement didn't feel like regular cold air. It wasn't just cool or chilly. It felt unnaturally cold, like something wasn't right. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and leaves you with goosebumps. I hesitated for a moment. The basement was always a little cold, but not like this. There was no reason for it to be so cold. No reason at all. The thermostat was set to a comfortable temperature. The furnace hadn't been running. In fact, no one had been down there for days. Curious and honestly a bit unsettled, I decided to check it out. Maybe the AC vent had gone out of whack. Maybe the pipes under the floor were leaking cold water, or there was some draft I hadn't noticed before. Whatever the reason, I figured I could figure it out. So I walked down the stairs, pulling the sleeve of my shirt over my hands to protect myself from the chill. The moment I reached the bottom, I could see my breath. I wasn't imagining it. The air was visibly cold, and the floorboards creaked under my feet as I walked into the center of the room. My breath came out in small clouds, and the temperature felt more like a freezer than a basement. My heart started to race. The basement itself was dark, the only light coming from a single bulb hanging above me, casting long shadows across the walls. Still, it seemed like something was dampening the light. I stood there trying to make sense of what I was feeling, my eyes scanning the room. There was nothing out of the ordinary. No pipes frozen over, no window open, nothing to explain the sudden drop in temperature. I walked over to the far corner where I kept a pile of old boxes and was met with an even sharper chill. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling my teeth start to chatter. This wasn't right. I looked around for any obvious causes, maybe a broken window, a cracked wall, something that could let in cold air, but nothing. It was as if the cold had seeped in from nowhere. There was no source for it, no explanation. And that's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The old door to the storage room, one that had been locked for months, was slightly ajar. I hadn't opened it recently. In fact, I'd almost forgotten about the space until now. It was just a small, cluttered room in the back corner of the basement, where I kept old furniture and boxes of things I would never need. The door hadn't been open in weeks, but now it was. Just a crack, but enough to make me nervous. I stood there for a few moments, debating whether I should investigate. It was probably nothing. The door must have just shifted on its own. But the chill, the strange, unnatural cold that filled the room, seemed to be coming from that direction. I took a hesitant step toward the door. With each step, the cold intensified. The air felt heavier, and my breath came out more visibly now, like I was walking deeper into some kind of freezing fog. By the time I was standing in front of the door, I was shivering uncontrollably. The cold was unlike anything I had ever felt before, as if it wasn't even air anymore, just a heavy, biting chill that seemed to pierce through my bones. I reached out to touch the handle, and for a moment, I thought about turning back. Maybe this was a sign that I shouldn't be down here. But curiosity won out. I pulled the door open just enough to peek inside. The room was dark, the only light coming from the bulb above me. I could make out the vague outlines of old boxes and furniture, stacked high against the walls. But there, in the farthest corner, was something strange. There was a dark shape near the back of the room, too far away for me to make out, but the chill in the air seemed to be coming from it, a shadow that didn't belong. I stepped inside, the cold now biting at my skin, making me feel like I was going numb. The room was even colder than the rest of the basement, if that was even possible. The hairs on my neck stood up. Something was definitely wrong now. I started to move toward the shape, slowly, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. The more I moved, the colder it got, until the point where I couldn't stand it anymore. My fingers felt stiff, my teeth were clattering together, and I was desperately trying to focus on what was in front of me. And then, I saw it. In the corner of the room was a small, old chair, covered with a dusty sheet. But beneath it, I noticed something else. A dark stain on the floor, like something had been spilled there long ago and never cleaned. It looked wet, as though it was still damp. The cold seemed to radiate from the spot, surrounding me. I reached out to touch it, not sure what I was hoping to find. And that's when I heard it. A low, almost imperceptible sound, like the faintest whisper, just at the edge of hearing. I spun around, my heart racing, but there was nothing there. The air was still, and the cold had become unbearable. I couldn't stand it any longer. I backed out of the room, slammed the door shut, and bolted back up the stairs. I haven't been back down to the basement since. I don't know what happened, or what that cold was. I don't know if I was just imagining it. I know I wasn't. Or if there was something else in that room with me. But I've never felt anything like it in my life. And every time I think about that dark, cold spot in the basement, I get the feeling that whatever it was, it's still there. The Ghostly Steps by Anonymous. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, and I had the house to myself. I had been busy with work all week, and I had finally gotten a break, so I was enjoying the peace and solitude of the day. My family was out for the afternoon, and I was planning on taking full advantage of the silence to catch up on a few things. I wanted to read a book, just relax, make some tea, you know? The house was old, not ancient, but it had its quirks. The floors creaked, the walls groaned in the winter, and sometimes you could hear the house settle, but it wasn't anything unusual. I was used to the sounds it made by now. But that day, there was something different. I had been sitting on the couch in the living room, reading, when I heard it. Soft at first, barely noticeable, but enough to make me put my book down. It was a series of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and echoing up from the basement. I paused, I frowned and listened. They were clear as day, one after another, heavy and slow, like someone was walking down there. Just thud, thud, thud. But I was the only one home. The basement door had been locked since at least a week ago, and there was no way anyone could have gotten in without me noticing. I sat up straight. My heart started beating faster. I couldn't have imagined it. It wasn't just a single creak of the house settling. These were unmistakably footsteps. I stood up, slowly, and walked toward the door, leading to the basement. It was still locked, just as it had been earlier that morning. I checked the handle, and sure enough, the latch was in place. There was no way anybody could have snuck down there without me hearing the door open. It was very noisy. The footsteps continued, one after another, slow and methodical, echoing through the house. My heart began to race, and my breath came a little quicker. I stood in front of the door, not really knowing what to do. The rational part of my brain told me it was probably just the house, settling or shifting with the temperature. But something in my gut told me that wasn't it, and I knew it. The steps were too distinct, too purposeful, and they were coming from the basement, a room that I knew nobody was in. I grabbed my phone and called my parents, hoping that they were on their way back, but the phone just rang and rang. I felt a cold sweat forming on the back of my neck as the steps echoed louder, closer, as though they were coming up the stairs toward me. I rushed back to the living room, feeling my legs shake beneath me. I could hear them clearly now, heavy steps, one after the other, even clearer than before, slow and deliberate, and this time, they were getting closer. Again, there was no one else in the house, I was sure of it. The basement door had been locked, I had just checked it. The noise had to be something else, something I hadn't thought of yet. But I couldn't think clearly at all. The footsteps were growing louder and louder, filling the house. I felt the weight of them, each step reverberating through the walls like they were right behind me. I took a deep breath and forced myself to walk back toward the door again. My hand hovered over the handle, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. What if there was somebody down there? What if it was a prank? I wanted to believe that, I really did. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something just didn't feel right. My stomach twisted into knots. I took another step back. The footsteps stopped. I froze. Every muscle in my body tensed. The silence in the house was deafening. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and I just knew that whoever or whatever was behind that door had to have heard it too. It was like the whole house was holding its breath, just waiting for something to happen. For a second, I thought maybe I was going nuts. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe I'd misheard it, but before I could convince myself of that, it started again. But this time, it was different. The footsteps came rapidly, not slow and deliberate, but quick, like someone was rushing up the stairs. There was no mistaking it. I could hear them clearly now, each one echoing in the stillness of the house, growing closer and closer until it felt like someone was standing just behind me. My heart was pounding in my ears. I spun around, almost expecting to see somebody, but there was nothing, no one. I couldn't take it anymore. My legs felt like they were made of lead as I backed away, almost stumbling toward the front door. The house was dead silent once again, but the cold feeling in the air lingered. The footsteps had stopped. I rushed to lock the door to the basement once more, even though I knew it already was, and of course, I was right. I felt ridiculous, like I was losing my mind. I stood there for a while, trying to calm myself down, telling myself it was just the house. Old houses make noises. They settle. But every time I thought about how clear those footsteps were, and how much clearer they got, I couldn't deny it. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone in that house. There was something there, something that I couldn't see. When my parents came home later that evening, I told them what had happened. They listened, but as soon as I mentioned the basement, they just looked at each other, like I just told them a strange story. They both assured me that it was just the house shifting, nothing more. I tried to let it go. I wanted them to be right, but every time I go down to that basement now, I feel the same sense of unease creeping over me. Something was down there. Maybe it still is. My parents don't believe me, so they're not even going to look into it, but I don't know what else to do, other than tell my story and, yeah, I guess that's it. The good part, though, is that I haven't heard those footsteps again, so hopefully it stays that way. Ghost Hotel in Texas by Beachy Girl 12, posted to r/ghost stories. My sister told me about a time when she, my brother-in-law, and my nephew stayed with her side of the family. My nephew, who was 2 years old at the time, was really unsettled at her aunt's house. He refused to sleep and kept trying to leave the house, acting very distressed for some reason. Eventually, they decided to leave and checked into a hotel in the Dallas area. I should mention that it was Halloween, which is important to the story. When they arrived at the hotel, the concierge casually mentioned that the place was haunted. He explained that a long time ago, a woman had been stood up on her wedding day. The groom never showed up, and in her despair, she took her own life from one of the floors of the hotel. At first, my sister thought it was just a Halloween prank, but as the three of them got off the elevator on the 13th floor, two elderly women gave them a very strange, unsettling look like something was off. Later that night, they tried to sleep, but at some point, the TV turned on by itself. My sister got up and turned it off, thinking it was just a random electrical glitch. But around 3 a.m., only a couple of hours later, the TV turned on again, all by itself. By morning, they were so freaked out that they decided to check out early. While checking out, my sister mentioned the strange events to the other concierge. To her surprise, the concierge calmly responded, "Oh, yeah, that always happens on the 13th floor." At that point, my sister realized that it hadn't been a prank at all. She had assumed the entire story was fabricated as a joke because it was Halloween, but the concierge said she thought my sister and her family were horror fanatics, especially since they had come from out of state. Dad let us know he made it by Glittering Love 7433, posted to r/paranormal. My dad passed on 8/19/24 from a very short battle with an aggressive cancer. He passed in his house, surrounded by family. Once everyone else left, me, my sister, and my mom were sitting in the living room with his body. We were talking about good memories with him, and all of a sudden, one of the lamps in the room starts strobing. It never ever did that before, and the bulb wasn't loose. We checked after. So there was no reason for it. Kind of jokingly, I said, "Dad, is that you?" And the other lamp in the room immediately starts strobing as well. We were in shock. I said, "You made it to the other side, right, Dad?" And they strobed even faster. Eventually, the second lamp stopped, and we turned off the first one because my mom was freaked out. It was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced in my life, but I was glad to know that he made it. Connected. I've been a forest ranger at Pisgah National Forest for going on 15 years now, and I thought I'd seen it all. Wildflowers that bloom only at night, albino squirrels, even the occasional bear that's too smart for its own good. But what I encountered last month, that takes the cake. It was a Tuesday, I remember that clearly. I was doing my usual rounds, checking on some of the more remote areas of the forest. We'd had some issues with illegal campers leaving trash behind, so I was keeping an eye out for any signs of human activity where there shouldn't be. The day was warm, but not too hot. One of those perfect early fall days where the leaves are just starting to think about changing color. I'd been hiking for about 4 hours when I came across a grove I didn't recognize. Now that might sound strange. How could I not recognize part of the forest I've worked in for over a decade? But Pisgah is big, almost 170,000 acres, and while I knew it better than most, there are still pockets that can surprise you. This grove was different. The trees were old, that much was clear. Massive trunks that would take 3 or 4 people to wrap their arms around. But it wasn't just their size that caught my attention. There was something about the way they were arranged, almost like they were huddled together. I approached slowly, my ranger instincts kicking in. As I got closer, I noticed the air felt different, thicker somehow, like the humidity had suddenly spiked. There was a smell, too, not unpleasant, but strong, like damp earth and something else I couldn't quite place. That's when I heard it. At first I thought it was just the wind through the leaves, but there was no breeze. It was a low humming sound, almost below the threshold of human hearing. I felt it more than I heard it, really, a vibration in my chest. I put my hand on the nearest tree trunk, thinking maybe it was some kind of insect activity inside the wood. The moment my skin touched the bark, the humming stopped. For a second, everything was dead silent. No birds, no bugs, nothing. Just me and these trees. Then it started again, but it was different this time. It was like... Well, the closest thing I can compare it to is those videos where they speed up plant growth. You know, the ones where you see a seed pushing up through the soil and unfurl its leaves in a matter of seconds. Time lapses. Yeah, those. All around me, I could hear creaking and groaning. Not loud, but constant. I looked down and saw roots shifting under the forest floor, raising little mounds of earth as they moved. I'll admit it, I panicked a bit. I pulled my hand away from the tree and took a step back. As soon as I broke contact, everything went still again. I stood there for I don't know how long, my heart pounding in my ears. Part of me wanted to turn tail and run, to get as far away from this place as I could. But the ranger in me, the part that spent a lifetime learning about and protecting this forest, that part was fascinated. Slowly, cautiously, I reached out and touched the tree again. This time, I was ready for it. The humming came back, softer now. The creaking and shifting started up too, but gentler. It was like the forest had realized I was there and was trying not to scare me off. As I stood there, hand on the rough bark, the strangest feeling came over me. It was like I could feel the tree's life, its slow, patient growth, the way its roots reached deep into the earth, how its branches stretched toward the sky. But it wasn't just this one tree. Somehow I could sense the others too. They were all connected, a vast network spreading out through the grove and beyond, and they were communicating. Not with words, nothing so simple as that. It was more like feelings, impressions, a slow exchange of information that had been going on for centuries. I don't know how long I stood there, trapped into this arboreal network. Could it have been minutes? Could it have been hours? I don't know. I was lost in it, though, experiencing the forest in a way that I never had before. A sharp crack snapped me out of it. When I opened my eyes, when had I closed them? I saw a deer standing at the edge of the grove, watching me curiously. When it saw me looking, it bolted, white tail flashing as it disappeared into the underbrush. I pulled my hand away from the tree, half expecting something dramatic to happen, but there was nothing. The grove looked exactly the same as when I'd first stumbled upon it. But I knew it wasn't the same. Or rather, I wasn't the same. I looked at my watch and was shocked to see that nearly 3 hours had passed. The sun was starting to dip low in the sky, painting the leaves with golden light. I needed to start heading back. As I turned to go, I felt a tug. Not physical, but mental, like the trees were asking me to stay. I smiled and patted the nearest trunk. "I'll be back," I said out loud, feeling only a little foolish for talking to a tree. "I promise." I made my way back to the ranger station in a daze. My colleague Sarah took one look at me and asked if I was feeling all right. "Yeah," I said. "Just had an interesting day." I thought about telling her what had happened, but the words wouldn't come. How could I describe it? How could I make her understand what I'd experienced? In the end, I just said that I'd found a new grove that needed to be mapped. She nodded and went back to her paperwork, completely unaware that my entire world had just shifted on its axis. I've been back to the grove several times since then. Sometimes I can tap into that network, feel the slow pulse of communication between the trees. Other times, it's just a normal stand of old-growth forest. But I know what's there now. I've felt it. And it's changed the way I look at my job, at the forest, at the whole world, really. There are those who say that forests are the lungs of the world. After what I experienced, I'd say they're more like the brain, a vast, ancient, interconnected mind that we're only just beginning to understand. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very quiet, you might just get to listen in on their conversations. I was a police officer, and I think I witnessed an actual curse by Weird Suggestion 152, posted to r/paranormal. I used to be a police officer in a city in Virginia. There's one upscale neighborhood in our city with very nice homes. I was always told stories when I was a new officer that there was a doctor who used to live in one of those homes. The story goes, the doctor attempted to perform some type of operation on himself. He numbed his stomach area and tried to make an incision on himself. But since he couldn't feel it, he accidentally cut too far and deep and disemboweled himself. When officers and paramedics arrived, he was found barely alive, holding his own intestines, and he ultimately died. Fast forward, I was assigned a call about a young female who was found dead by her older sister. When I arrived on scene, it was in the aforementioned nice neighborhood. When I exited my vehicle, I immediately had an uneasy feeling about the house. While nice on the outside, it had just enough bad energy surrounding it. As I approached the front porch, I noticed countless empty energy drink cans and a Ouija board on the front patio table. Everything about this house just felt wrong. When I was led inside, the family was obviously very distraught. I was told the deceased sister, we'll call her Emily, was in the basement. At this point, another officer had also arrived, and so he stayed upstairs with the family as I entered the basement. The basement was an unfurnished one and was fairly dark, minus 2 pull-string light bulbs, one on each side of the basement. The scene in the basement was similar to the front porch. Energy drink cans were everywhere, and another Ouija board was on a small coffee table. Emily, who was 19 if I remember correctly, was hanging by her neck on a basement rafter. She had hung herself with an exercise band and was swinging back and forth slightly. Her face was blue, bloated, and contorted into a horrible expression. Another officer helped me lift her to bring her down. Emily's family consisted of her mother and father and her older sister. Her parents stated that they had been trying to help her because all she ever did was drink those energy drinks to stay up all hours of the night playing the Ouija board. Her sister gave a little more detail about it. Being sisters, she stated they were very close and told each other everything. Her older sister said that Emily indeed had been obsessed with the Ouija board, drinking energy drinks to stay up all night and talk to what she believed was her boyfriend, who was dead. Her sister stated Emily had been saying that her boyfriend was begging for her to come and join him in the afterlife, and so she believed that's why she did what she did. Now, let me reiterate, this house felt wrong. Everything felt bad, and I had a very uneasy, sick feeling being in the basement. And not because of the dead body. It wasn't my first. This is a call that really messed with me for a while. We really never got much more explanation, and as cops, you just kind of have to move on to the next call. 2 weeks later, to the day, I get a call about a car accident with ejection. I head to the call code 1, lights and sirens, and arrive to find a convertible BMW with the top down, which had experienced an obvious horrible crash and rollover. It was sitting on its wheels, and in the driver's seat was a woman who clearly had a broken neck, as her head was almost all the way turned around. Next to the vehicle, about 25 feet away, was a man who had been ejected. Keep in mind, this was a convertible, so he was ejected from the top of the car. He was missing the entire top half of his head, and, well, it was pretty gruesome. I went to close off the scene with yellow tape. I walked about 75 yards away from the accident, where I found another part of him. I'm not trying to be intentionally graphic, but I need to paint the picture of just how bad and just how violent this car accident was. Upon obtaining the man's ID, I read the information off to dispatch, and then another officer and I both realized the same thing at the same time. These two people were Emily's parents, who 2 weeks to the day just died in a horrible way. Breaking the news to the older sister was heartbreaking. I kept in touch with her for a little while. She had inherited her parents' estate and all of the life insurance money and all of that. She ended up selling off everything and buying a different house to try to start over and repair her broken life. However, it doesn't end there. Around a month later, another officer was called after a pedestrian was struck by a car while she was jogging in her neighborhood, and yes, I don't have to tell you, it was the sister. She managed to survive several weeks in a coma, but ultimately she didn't make it. If you're wondering why the story about the doctor is relevant, the house that Emily herself in was the same house the doctor lived in. I don't know what you guys think, but to me, it definitely seems like either that house is cursed or Emily opened up something really bad. That was a few years ago, and I'm no longer a police officer. I moved a couple of states away now. Twice, I have found 2 different Ouija board planchettes on the sidewalk when going to check the mail. I never touch them, and usually I just use a stick or something to push them into the storm drain. Moonspeak. I've always been a bit of a loner, which is why I love solo camping trips. There's something about being alone in the wilderness that recharges my batteries like nothing else. But after what happened on my last trip to the Ozarks, I'm not sure I'll ever feel the same about being alone in the woods again. It was early October and the weather was perfect for camping, crisp and cool, with just enough bite in the air to make a campfire feel heavenly. I had hiked deep into the Mark Twain National Forest, far from any established campgrounds. As the sun began to set, I found a small clearing near a babbling creek and set up my tent. The first couple of days were blissful. I spent my time hiking, reading, and simply soaking in the solitude. The forest was alive with autumn colors, maples flaming red, oaks in burnished gold, and the occasional flash of a cardinal winging through the canopy. At night, I'd sit by my small fire, listening to the whisper of the wind through the leaves and the gentle hooting of owls. But on the third night, things took a turn that I still can't fully explain. I may never be able to. I had just finished my dinner of dehydrated stroganoff when I noticed how bright it was getting. Peering through the canopy of oak and hickory trees, I saw the full moon rising, so luminous it was almost like daylight. I doused my campfire, grabbed a thermos of tea, and decided to do a bit of stargazing before turning in. As I settled onto a fallen log, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The usual nighttime chorus of crickets and frogs fell silent, and even the creek seemed to quiet its burbling. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I had the distinct feeling of being watched. That's when I heard it. A wolf's howl, low and mournful, echoing through the trees. Now, I knew there were wolves in Missouri, but they're incredibly rare and usually stay far from humans. This one sounded close. Too close. I was about to retreat to my tent when the howl came again, and this time I froze in place because mixed in with that animal sound, I could have sworn I heard words. Help me. My heart began to race. It had been my imagination, right? Maybe the wind was playing tricks, or my mind was trying to make sense of an unfamiliar sound. I strained my ears, waiting. The third howl removed all doubt. It was definitely a wolf's cry, but layered within it, as clear as day, was a human voice. Please, help. I stood up, my legs shaking. Hello? I called out, my voice sounding thin and reedy in the vast darkness. Is someone there? Silence fell again, heavy and oppressive. Then came a rustling from the underbrush about 50 yards away. I fumbled for my flashlight, clicking it on just in time to catch a glimpse of something large moving through the shadows. It was roughly the size and shape of a wolf, but something was off. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, as if it wasn't quite used to its own body. As my light fell upon it, the creature turned its head toward me. For as long as I live, I will never forget those eyes. They were unmistakably human, filled with intelligence, and, most disturbingly, a profound sadness. They locked onto mine for just a moment before the creature darted away. I couldn't catch my breath for a few seconds, and I was shaking like a leaf. I knew I had just encountered something, but what? For the rest of the night, I huddled in my tent, jumping at every snapping twig and rustling leaf. The howls continued, sometimes near, sometimes far, always with that haunting undercurrent of human speech. I caught words and phrases. Trapped. Save us. Each one sending a fresh wave of goosebumps across my skin. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, the howls finally ceased. I broke camp in record time, my hands shaking so badly I could barely roll up my sleeping bag. As I hurried down the trail, my mind raced with questions. What had I seen? What had I heard? Was it some elaborate prank, or had I stumbled upon something truly supernatural? The hike back to my car was a blur. Every shadow seemed to hide watching eyes, and every breeze through the leaves sounded like whispered words. When I finally reached the trailhead, I nearly wept with relief at the sight of my old beat-up Subaru. I've spent countless hours since then, researching local legends and myths. I have found whispers of tales, stories of shamans who could take the form of wolves, of cursed individuals trapped between human and animal. The Ozarks are steeped in folklore, with tales of shapeshifters and spirit animals passed down through generations of native tribes and settlers alike. One story in particular keeps coming back to me. An old Cherokee legend speaks of a clan of warriors who could take on the form of wolves to protect their people. But the legend warns that those who stay too long in wolf form risk losing their humanity, becoming trapped between worlds. Could that be what I encountered? A being caught between human and wolf crying out for help? Or was it something else entirely? Something beyond my comprehension? I've thought about reporting it to the authorities or to some paranormal research group, but I'm not sure even they would believe me. Most days, I'm not even sure I believe myself. But then night falls, and I hear a distant howl, and I find myself straining to hear words in its cry. That trip changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. I used to seek out solitude, embracing the peace of wild places. Now I find myself wondering about the thin veil between our world and others we can't comprehend. What other secrets do the forests hold? What other voices might be crying out, just beyond the edge of our understanding? I still camp, occasionally, but never alone, and never during a full moon. And whenever I hear a wolf's howl echoing in the distance, a part of me always listens for words, for that plea for help that I was unable or unwilling to answer on that fateful night. Sometimes in my dreams, I'm back in those woods. But in the dreams, I'm braver. I follow the howls, pushing through the underbrush until I come face to face with the wolf that isn't quite a wolf. In these dreams, I reach out, trying to help, to understand, but just as my fingers brush its fur, I always wake up, heart pounding, sheets tangled around me. I've tried to convince myself that it was all just a hallucination, a trick of the light and the loneliness playing on an overactive imagination. But deep down, I know what I saw, what I heard, and I can't help but wonder, if I had stayed, if I had been braver, could I have helped? Could I have solved the mystery of the moon's beak? There are nights when the moon is full and bright, and I find myself drawn to the window, staring out at the tree line. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I see a pair of all too human eyes staring back at me from the shadows. In those moments, I feel the pull of the forest, the weight of an unanswered call for help. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what happened that night in the Ozarks. Honestly, that might be for the best. All I know for sure is that, for me, everything has changed. The Shadowed Corner by Jamie P. I've always been a bit of a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. I don't believe in ghosts or things that go bump in the night. But that was before what happened in my basement. Now, I'm not so sure. It started on a rainy Saturday evening, the kind of day where you don't really feel like going anywhere. So, I decided to stay in, get some chores done around the house. I was in the middle of cleaning out the basement, sorting through old boxes of stuff that I'd been meaning to get rid of for years. I don't go down there too often, mostly because it's cold and dim and just not the nicest place to spend time. But I needed to get through it. I was down there for a good hour or so, moving things around, opening up old boxes, and deciding what to throw away. The basement was mostly quiet, except for the sound of the rain against the windows and the occasional creak of the house. I didn't mind the solitude. I was focused on my task and not really thinking about anything else. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. I was standing by the shelves when I noticed a dark figure in the far corner of the basement, just behind an old armchair. It was tall, dark, and almost seemed to have a shape, but it didn't look quite right. I froze. At first, I thought it was just a shadow or something cast by the dim lighting. But when I looked again, I could see it more clearly. It wasn't a shadow from anything around it. It was a figure. I'm not sure how to describe it. It didn't have any real features, no face, no distinct outline, just a dark, human-shaped figure standing motionless in the corner of the room. The way it stood made my stomach tighten. It felt like it was watching me. It didn't move, but it was there. I froze. I know it sounds stupid, but I stood there for a good few seconds, just staring at it. I was trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Could it have been my eyes playing tricks on me? Maybe it was a trick of the light. The basement was pretty dim, and the rain outside made everything feel a little darker. I wasn't sure what I was looking at, but something in me told me to turn on the lights. My hands were shaking as I walked over to the light switch by the stairs, never taking my eyes off that spot in the corner. I flicked the switch and waited for the lights to come on, fully expecting that the figure would be gone when they did. The basement lights buzzed to life, and I quickly turned back around to the corner where the figure had been standing. There was nothing. The corner was empty. No shadow, no dark shape. Just a pile of old boxes and that stupid armchair. I blinked, confused. For a moment, I just stood there in silence, the light hum of the basement filling the air. There was no sign of what I had just seen moments before. I stepped forward, looking around the room like maybe it would pop out from behind something, or maybe it was a trick of my eyes. But no, there was nothing. Nothing I could mistake for it. Nothing that cast a shadow. The basement was just as it had been before. I don't know why, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, almost expecting that dark figure to appear again. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't explain why. I didn't feel like I was in danger per se, but the unease lingered. I spent the next few minutes in the basement, checking every corner, every nook, even opening the door to the laundry room just to make sure. Nothing was out of place, but the sense of something not being right stayed with me. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't like I heard footsteps or felt an overwhelming presence. It was more of a nagging feeling, like I had just witnessed something I shouldn't have seen. I didn't go back down to that basement for a few days after that. I told myself that it was just my imagination. Maybe I was tired or a little jumpy, and the shadow I saw was a trick of the dim light and the rain outside. But it didn't feel like that. It felt real. A few nights later, I went back down there to grab something from the basement. I tried to shake off the nerves. Everything was fine, normal, like it had always been. Except I kept glancing at that same corner, the one where I had seen the figure. I couldn't help it. Every time I passed that spot, I had the feeling that I was being watched, but I tried to ignore it. When I finished what I was doing and started back upstairs, I glanced at the corner one last time. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Something dark, moving in the corner. But when I turned, it was gone. I can't really explain what happened that night in the basement. I don't know if I saw something that wasn't really there, or if it was something else entirely. But after that, I couldn't look at that corner the same way again. Every time I walk past the basement stairs, I feel that odd sense of unease. I still try to tell myself that it was nothing, but I can't shake the feeling that it's something, and that it's still there, waiting.